It looks like I got myself an honest to goodness bike in a box. Now this is a kit you send away for. You got to build them yourself. This here is a 2009 Honda CRF150R. Is not the big wheel version. It's got the smaller wheels. That would make it the smaller wheel version. And at first this thing looks a little intimidating. Somebody else took it apart and it's been sitting for quite a while. However, it doesn't look that bad. It looks like most of the stuff was at least carefully bagged and included with the sale. Now the story with it is it has a couple of bent valves. And while I have not looked at it too extensively yet, I have not seen anything that would indicate why the valves would be bent. I know these bikes have a issue with the cam sprocket, I guess in the earlier years, maybe twisting, and it would cause running or performance issues, but as far as to twist far enough to hit intake valves, not sure. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got and what we need to get ordered and get this thing going again. My girl rides a TTR 125 LE right now, and she looked at this and her eyes lit up a little bit. Not sure she's ready for a race bike yet. She's a little bit timid on the 125, although she's been riding it for a while. We're gonna stick her on it and hopefully she proves me wrong and she can start airing this thing out 75 plus feet. No, that's not gonna happen. So the main stuff I'm initially concerned with is going to be right here on this bench. I've got a box full of engine parts and I've got a complete bottom end. That's a pretty stout chain, I gotta be honest with you. I mean, the bigger bikes chain's not even this stout. Kind of crazy. Transmission feels good. The crankshaft feels great. There's actually no play in it whatsoever. I'd say more than likely you got a pretty good bottom end here. Valve cover. Some vent hoses, cooling hoses, little tiny piston. Doesn't look too bad. It's got a little chip on it right there. And a little chip on it right there. So we're probably going to be replacing this piston. Here's the cylinder head. Both the intake valves are knocked over. Why? I don't know. Here's our cylinder. It's got a little bit of a wear mark right along here. I'll measure this up, see what it looks like. Miscellaneous engine mounts, tensioner, bunch of bolts, tappets, at least one tappet. Cam bridge. There's the other tappet in there. Cam bearings feel a little bit rough. The auto decomp is out of the camshaft. chain guide. Okay, here's the auto decompression lever. Should be a spring. Got it. So that's good. Should be able to put this back together. Air filter's missing, the foam part. Usually when I get these and the foam's missing, the cage is missing as well, but this one's here. Now I'm just going to go ahead and take a measurement on the cylinder and piston. I'm going to replace the piston anyway, but just let me make sure that the cylinder is in spec or can be used. We have 2.594 inches. So according to the spec, we're actually in spec on the cylinder 2.599. We're at 2.594, so we're in good shape. I'm going to take some measurements in a couple of different positions to see if there's any out around our taper. All right, well, the good news is the cylinder is usable. It does have some out of round, more out of round than taper, but it is usable. I'll hit it with a hone real quick and get it ready for a new piston. .582. All right, next step. Let me go ahead and pull all these valves out. See if we have damaged seats or damaged valve guides. Well, we definitely have a broken valve guide. I'm probably just going to go ahead and replace both of the intake valve guides and all 4 valves. Alright, so I think I know what I need to order. Get myself a new fancy piston and ring set. Get a set of new kibble white valves for this. Valve guide that's damaged. Obviously, we're going to need a gasket kit. And then whatever knickknacks and miscellaneous patty wax there might be. Finally got our new valve guides, kibble white. Replace these 2 intakes. Got a driver. Your best course of action on this is to actually press these out. I don't have a press, so I'm going to actually just pop them out with a hammer. Obviously, using a press is going to be your best case scenario, but we'll be getting a press and a blasting cabinet and all this stuff in the future. But right now, got to use what I got. So what I'm going to do is just put a little bit of heat around here to knock these out. I don't want to put too much because I don't want to warp this head. I'm going to go ahead and get these in the freezer right now. And then once we get these out, we'll throw the head in the oven, bake it up for like 400 degrees for a few minutes, get it nice and toasty warm. We'll get it down here and get these pressed in. Now, before we do anything, I want to take a depth measurement. And I want to see how deep these are mounted. Say 0.582. All right, head fresh out of the oven. Now we went ahead and checked the specs. And they want us to be at 0.56 to 0.57. So that might have contributed to why the valve dropped or bent in the first place. These were not down far enough in the head. Perfect. We'll go ahead and check the height of these exhaust guides as well. 0.78 to 0.79. The exhaust looks good. Now let all this cool down, and then we'll have to hone our guides to the proper size. But at this point here, I'm just going to go ahead and move on to putting the piston, cylinder, and all that stuff back together. Next, just a couple of steps before we can put this engine together. I want to do a light stone hone on the cylinder to take out any light imperfections, light taper, light ridges, and then we can go ahead and measure our ring gap to make sure we're not going to have any clearance issues with our brand new piston and rings. Almost there, trying to work out this little shiny spot here. Well, crap, I made a little boo-boo here. I didn't pay attention to my grinding stones. They're really worn down and rounded off. And what did I end up doing was focusing too much on this little shiny spot that I ended up taking the Nicosil coating off the top and the bottom. So I mean, it's a bad thing because the cylinder was actually in decent shape and it's still a replatable cylinder, but I can't use it for this situation. So I only have one choice. Just go ahead and get a brand new cylinder. Goes with our brand new piston. So we'll have a completely new top end on this thing. Probably best anyway. I'm going to take a measurement on that ring gap, make sure it's not too tight and within spec. 0.20 millimeter. That is in spec. Although it's at the top end of the spec, it's in spec. Well, we got the new valve guides pressed in. The inside diameter is small for the new valves, which will not go in, which means we need to ream these. What that takes is a 4.5, these are 4.5 millimeters, just slightly over. After taking all the measurements, we're going to use a 4.5 millimeter ream, and we're going to ream out this valve guide, and then we will hone it. We want to do this from the bottom, or from the valve side. We want to go slow because we don't want to damage it until it starts going in. Probably best done by hand. We're out through the top, which is good. Going in the same direction, we're going to walk it back out. Next step is we're going to use a 4.5 millimeter ball hone. The valve's fitting. It's definitely still a little too tight and dragging. When this engine gets hot, this may grab and cause the valves to bend. So we're going to continue to hone it until it's within spec. Next thing I'll do now is I'll lap in my valves. And I've done this on a couple other of my videos, so I won't get too in depth here. And if these don't lap in properly, you're probably going to need to have the valve seats recut. What we're looking for is that dark gray line where the valve seat is making contact with the valve, and it should be right in the middle between the two. This one here is definitely in the middle. You can see a shiny spot on the top, shiny spot on the bottom. The valve seat is a little bit wide, but I'm not going to worry about it on this rebuild. Now we'll just go ahead and lap in the rest of the valves, clean everything real good, and then we can put this head back together. If you don't have these lapping spindles, which are available on the Jungle website, fairly inexpensive. Another way to do this would be to put your valve, and from the top, if you get a piece of rubber hose that's tight on your valve, you can put it on there and use the hose to actually run the valve back and forth, just pulling up on it slightly. Even doing it with your fingers would be okay. I got all my parts cleaned up, laid out here, keeping the valves in order of where I lapped them on the head so they can go back in the same spot. Got 2 new intake springs, 2 new exhaust springs, the new collets to hold the valves in, new valve seals. Once I get this in, I like to get it back on the bench here on some blocks so that they're not actually interfering with the valves, and we'll just give them a few taps to seat everything. If you don't do this, the problem that you're going to potentially face is when you're shimming the valves, they'll come out of spec pretty quickly once this starts seating in. Make sure those clips are in there good. Put the rag here to keep that clip from falling down in the crankcase. I tighten these in a cross pattern, several steps, 10, 16, and then 21 for 08 and after. 07 I believe was 23 foot-pounds. Now that the head is on, comes time to shim these valves. we have to do this. There's a lot of on and off with this cam bridge, cam cap, cam holder. And basically what we're doing is replacing the shims, which are right here on top of the valves between the rocker arms. And I've already shimmed these up so that they're in spec. This is where you take your measurement on your exhaust side. The measurement for the intake will be taken between your cam lobe and your tappet, which is right underneath it, and that'll be taken right through here. And I'll put the measurements up on the screen. I have a couple videos on shimming valves. We're going to get too in depth on this, but we just want to make sure our proper shim just glides between the tappet and the cam lobe. 10 foot-pounds. After you torque your holder down, double check all your specs to make sure you're still in specs. Sometimes tightening these up will tighten up your clearances as well, so just double check that. We got to take this cover off. This shows where your timing marks are for top dead center. However, it's pretty stripped out and I'm going to have to work on it a little bit. So I don't feel like doing that right now. I'm going to find my top dead center using a long screwdriver down inside the cylinder, hitting the top of the piston. How we do this, we'll just rotate the crankshaft forward and watch the screwdriver come up. See, as it starts going back down, you can already tell. Normally you don't want to go forward and back on this, but right now there's no valves hooked up and we're okay. Roll this forward and back, that screwdriver moves up and down, up and down. So when we're at our peak, that's right going to be our top dead center. And generally what you're going to see is your keyway for your Woodruff key is going to point straight up the cylinder. I got to get this cap off, and unfortunately the last guy that was in here stripped it out. This is a 10 millimeter. I can't go to a 12 because it's too big, so I'm going to go ahead and cut a little bit of a notch in the side of it so I can get a screwdriver and kind of back it out. Just give her a little tappy, little tap tap taparoo. Your top dead center can also be determined by matching up the punch mark with the notch in the case. I think some of yours might have a hash mark on it. Well, we're at top dead center, getting ready to install this camshaft sprocket, and problem 579 on this thing. I mentioned earlier in a video how these twist, and that's exactly what we've got here. So this is definitely what caused this to happen. The valve struck the piston. On this flange, there's a notch right there. That notch is supposed to line up right here. Okay, and when in that position, these cam lobes should be facing just like this, but it's way off. So this whole front nose of this camshaft is twisted, and what that means is I need to order a camshaft. To eliminate this problem from happening again, I'm just going to put a hot cams stage 2 camshaft in this. Little trick to holding in your exhaust gasket, use a little bit of wheel bearing grease. Non-ethanol. After all this work, this thing better start. Of course, the choke don't stay out. Heard a little bit of a bobble. factory to pilot jet on this was 38, and a 138 main. I kept the 138 main and went up to a 40 pilot jet. A lot of the forums say 45 is a good spot for this, and it does sound like it's maybe just a tick lean down low. I don't have a 42 to go halfway, so I might pull it and just go with a 45 and see how that works. Alright, so I put the 45 slow jet in, runs better down low. It's got 138 main. I still have to get a hot start assembly here for the clutch, but she runs pretty good. Now all we got to do is get her cleaned up, see if the girl wants to ride the bike or stick with her TTR. I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for all your support, comments. It means a lot to me. Really appreciate it. A couple other exciting projects coming up in the future, so stay tuned. Thanks again. We'll see you on the next one.